Hey friends, it's Melvin. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Here's just a few quick things I wanted to notify you guys about before we get started. First up, very soon, new episodes will be releasing Wednesday mornings rather than Tuesday. So don't panic if you don't see a new episode on Tuesday. Just wait a little longer and you'll see it in your feed. Second, we've introduced a mailbag. Check those show notes and toward the bottom you'll see a mailbag link. You'll then be able to text us any questions you might have about movies, the movie industry, or any movie/Christian related questions you might have. Then we'll respond in a future episode, so send us your questions now. Up next, Patreon polls, which are available to Patreon supporters at the $3 tier or higher, have been updated. Supporters can now suggest films or shows to be reviewed at the end of each month. The two most liked submissions will become the options for the Patreon poll, so if you want to hear us talk about your favorite movie or show, join our Patreon and start campaigning. And lastly, whether you're a new or longtime listener, please consider writing a review or rating the Cinematic Doctrine podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Apart from financially supporting on Patreon, these are the two most helpful ways to support the show. And that's it. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Trailer Talk, a monthly segment on Cinematic Doctrine where my co-host Dan and I talk about trailers that released during the previous month. In this episode of Trailer Talk, Dan and I look at January 2020 and talk about A Quiet Place Part 2, and whether JJ Abrams is disappointed he didn't get the chance to add A Quiet Place into the Cloverfield franchise, Tenet, and how Christopher Nolan is creative insofar as he's allowed to have men wear suits and ties while talking somberly in an office building, Morbius, a movie that I literally forgot we talked about and still can't take seriously, and The New Mutants, which is honestly our most anticipated movie of 2018. You can check out all these trailers at the Cinematic Doctrine website if you haven't seen them already. A link of them will be provided in the show notes. January 2020 gave us a very strange batch of trailers, and I think it's a common thread that, throughout our discussion, we're far more interested in what's going on behind the scenes with these movies than the movies themselves. Sometimes that's where the better story is, but we're still hoping these movies turn out great. If you enjoy the show, be sure to check out Cinematic Doctrine's other offerings like monthly movie news and our regular movie reviews. You can also leave a review on your respective podcast app to show your support or go one step further and consider supporting the show via Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can influence the show by choosing a movie we review at the end of every month. Or, you don't have to. That's cool too. We're just glad you're here. And if you want to keep up with Daniel, you can check him out on Twitter at TomRondo1, that's an H after the R. All of this will be available in the show notes. Just a heads up, while we were very much prepared for this episode, we simply forgot to introduce the very first trailer we discuss, A Quiet Place Part 2. As such, I'll introduce it here. Following the events at home, the Abbott family now face the terrors of the outside world. Forced to venture into the unknown, they realize the creatures that hunt by sound are not the only threat lurking beyond the sand path. Writer-director John Krasinski alongside co-writer Scott Beck take us back into the world of A Quiet Place. That should be enough to get the ball rolling. Without further ado, let's talk some trailers.
So last episode, I believe we talked about A Quiet Place, right? Like the teaser?
Yeah, we mentioned the teaser at the end for about 10 minutes, but there really wasn't a lot we could go on because all it is walking in grass, Noah Jupe looks so much older, and then foot on ground, cut to black.
Well, so the actual full trailer got released not too long after that, actually. I think it was pretty within a week from the teaser that we saw. And I mean, I'll say this about it, at least it has a lot more going on for it. I was a little concerned that it would just be like the group goes to a new location and just does the same movie again. And to their credit, it looks like they're actually attempting to expand the world in a way that explores new ideas and new themes that the previous one didn't. Or the first movie is very much a film that's the fears of isolation and being alone, while this one is a fear of the complete opposite, where now there's strangers involved. What does this mean? I did get some Bird Box vibes from this. Did you?
Yeah, I was getting extreme Bird Box vibes, especially with it starts with day one and shows the
Like everybody's running around and freaking out while our main characters are in a car, which always means that they're very safe.
Yeah.
And as much as Bird Box has its faults, like I think that car scene in the movie was pretty effective. And so I if you're gonna imitate something from Bird Box, then that's a good scene to imitate. I'd be curious though if like because we talked about how John Krasinski had plans for the sequel and was like, if we do a sequel, then it should be something small. It should be something like this. And so to start with that, apart from just being sort of money shot in trailer scenes, like I'd be curious to see if his idea of staying small is like my idea of staying small. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, we'll definitely see. Yeah. Whenever a creative voice gets to be at the helm, that makes me excited or interested. At the very least, interested, because either it's going to be something that's bad, but it's going to be bad in a very unique way that you could only get from somebody getting control, or it's going to be, I think an actual continuation of someone's themes, ideas, and vision, as opposed to just getting a gun for hire director to, pump out another one because the first one did well. And I don't know, I'm a sucker for any horror movie, and I guess these are horror films. They don't suddenly stop being horror because they're successful or people like them. Then they don't just magically become thrillers. I like horror where like the idea is like, oh man, like as cliche as it is, the whole people are the real monsters kind of thing, but that just for whatever reason that always scratches my itch, where you sort of get to see like the darkness in people sort of come out and unravel due to extreme circumstances. And then you always get, the scene where like you see like the little bit of humanity push through because the person makes the right call or decides to sacrifice themselves or whatever. Like that just always gets my blood going. I don't know. I do like these monsters, I gotta say. Like I like the Quiet Place monsters, and I like that since now we've already seen them in the first one, they're not too gun shy about showing them. Now they get to be more front and center, and I expect more like chase scenes through buildings and more unique locations because they're not just married to that one location anymore. And I like Cillian Murphy, so I really thought I'd see him in more things. I don't know what happened to him.
Well, he did a lot of like British films, and then he was over here for The Dark Knight, and then he was over. Well, actually, I was about to say he was over here for 28 Days Later, but nope, that was still shot over in the UK. So, yeah, I thought he would do a lot more. And then I guess maybe it's just he chooses the films he wants to be in and not the films that'll make him successful. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, do you have anything else you want to say about this, or?
Well, I no. I mean, it's the trailer looks good, but so did the trailer for the first movie, and I didn't really enjoy the first movie, so I would just hope that this one I enjoy more because I'll see it, and that's that.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm sure this movie will do well. I mean, there's a part of me that always roots for original ideas doing well, and if this is a franchise, this is the type of franchise I'd rather have more of, rather than like we made a movie with 15 other films in development that are spin-offs, prequels, and sequels with the hopes that we can make a franchise out of this. So, I mean, I thought the first one was good. I didn't love it as much as everyone else did. I thought it was a really good theater experience, but I'm rooting for the franchise. So,
You know what I would find interesting is whether or not JJ Abrams is bummed he didn't grab the script when he could and put Cloverfield on it.
yeah, slap the name on there.
Because I remember when it came out and everyone was like, this feels like it should be a Cloverfield movie. And then Abrams is like, no, a Cloverfield movie is Cloverfield Paradox. That's what it is. And everyone else is like, no, please don't do that again. I think Overlord was supposed to be a Cloverfield movie because after Cloverfield Paradox came out, Abrams said, yeah, we have another Cloverfield movie coming out in a couple months. And then there was a trailer that drops for Overlord and it says Bad Robot, and it has, it's a World War II movie with like zombie-like creatures. And I remember thinking to myself, oh no, please don't ruin this. And then you go and see Overlord and it has no connection to Cloverfield whatsoever. And I think that was just because Abrams was like, I made a huge mistake. Like, I can't just put Cloverfield on something and expect people to watch it.
Yeah, I can't decide if I love or hate that idea, where it's just, I love the idea of movies that otherwise would not be getting made getting to the light of day because they found some loose connection to some other franchise. But the other hand, I also hate that for the same reason. What's that? There's a show Pennyworth that's on Epix. Do you know that show?
I don't.
It's a prequel to Batman focusing on Alfred Pennyworth.
Wow, that's exactly what I want.
Yes. Well, to me it's peak, like, this is as loosely connected to a known IP as we can get, because there's nothing Batman in that. Like, there's no, full disclosure, I, like 99.9% of all humanity, have not watched Pennyworth, but I'm assuming that, like, unless he fights like very deep cut like Batman rogues or DC rogues in the 40s or whatever this takes place in, like, I don't understand how it's been at Batman, but it's a good example of, like, 20-30 years ago, that would just be a spy show. It'd just be on, after Get Smart or something, and you just have your little spy show and that would be it. But because it doesn't have name value, you got to slap some name value on it. So, like, 10 Cloverfield Lane, I thought was a great movie. Like, I really like that movie a lot, but like, I could see how no one would want to greenlight a movie called The Cellar and just like put the money behind it that they would need to. I mean, thankfully not, because of things like Shudder. I think we're seeing more like lower budgeted horror movies getting made, but it's very sad. But if that's like the means to the end to get some good stuff, I'm all for it. But then he made like Cloverfield Paradox, so who knows? Maybe it's a horrible idea. I do like, in theory, the idea that things can exist in the same world, and the only thing that ties them together is this singular giant event. So like the Cloverfield event. But then, like, seeing all the different peripheral stories around that, I think that has potential. Because, I mean, like, 10 Cloverfield Lane is a good example of, like, okay, an event of, like, a world-ending cataclysmic event. What about the people who just ran to a bomb shelter? Like, I think there's some stories there. But I don't think people will want to see stories that small and intimate. So, or they don't think they do anyway.
What makes stuff like that interesting is then you can, if they're good movies, they're good on their own.
Yeah.
But for people who really enjoy them, they get to kind of study them and learn more, because it was fun between Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane, kind of seeing the connections. You had the what was it, like the Tiger Auto company, and learning, like, okay, how is everything their fault, let's put this together, and stuff like that was exciting. Of course, then you get Cloverfield Paradox, which just overtly connects everything, which is its big flaw, the fact that it just connected everything in such a tight knit aspect that, like, all of the mystery just evaporated. And thank goodness that didn't happen with something like A Quiet Place, where at the end of the movie we like look up into the sky and you see like Cloverfield Paradox's like spaceship up there instead. And you're like, oh, that explains why all these monsters are here. Like, I think just less is more. And so I opened up talking about, like, cool, like the opening scene, or at least the opening scene for the trailer, is day one, and it's showing the disaster, like, as it starts. But also, I don't need to see that. First off, that costs a lot more money for you to do if you're doing a movie. And second, you could just pull like a 28 Days Later, where you have 3 people who are hiding in a mini mart and one guy just talks about his experience. And because it's this intimate relay of information, it's way more emotional. And also it's a lot shorter, and it gives you more time for drama later in the movie. So I mean, but whatever, people don't really want to listen to people talk. They want to watch giant monsters cause mayhem.
I'll go this a step further. I think zombies, monsters, those types of things are so ingrained in the cultural consciousness that if I was watching a movie and the first scene was just a guy running and a zombie chasing him, that is all I need. Like, I do not need more information than that. I know what zombies are. I know what danger they pose. Like, use that time and space to focus on something else and give me a richer experience. Like, that's kind of why there have been repeated attempts to make like a Stephen King verse, like in movies and television. And I pray to God that never actually gets off the ground, because guess what? Like, the only thing that would make it too like worse is if it was like, actually it's part of this shared universe of monsters and this is how it connects into The Stand and so all this other stuff. Like, Stephen King stories, like most horror stories, are scary because they prey upon fears that we can all have and we can all sort of imagine. Like, the guy in the shadows, like, he doesn't get scarier if he's part of some sort of cosmic horror that ties into like 40 books that Stephen King wrote. I think that makes them dumber and stupider. So like, I hope that like all these repeated attempts, as much as it's sad that Dr. Sleep didn't do well, I hope that it sours people an idea of like making a bunch of Stephen King movies that connect in some way. That's just, we don't need that. I'm sorry.
Actually, talking about connecting universes, we talked about Cloverfield and Abrams. I think Abrams with Hulu is trying to test out a Stephen King universe with their short series or their limited series.
Castle
where it's
Rock,
like,
right?
yeah, and so that's sort of just a test, like, hey, would people be receptive to this? But we already know people are receptive to like a shared Stephen King universe because his books are very loosely connected to each
Yeah.
other. Like, if you just go through the books, there are loose connections between all of them, and the reason that they work is because they're by themselves and you would miss them unless I've read like, 17 of this
Yeah.
book, because the guy just doesn't know how to stop typing. And what becomes interesting is now you get to think like, oh, did Pennywise influence this for just like a second, or was something over here? Like, what about the Wendigo in Pet Cemetery, or whatever the thing is in Pet Cemetery? But that's not the point though, because it doesn't matter that they're connected. You know why they're connected? Because the same guy wrote all of the stories. That's why they're connected.
Right.
That's why Lovecrafts are all connected, because he's just the same dude typing stuff out, and he's now pulling on his own inspiration as opposed to outside sources. He's going, it'd be pretty cool if this color out of space thing, maybe it was one of the old ones, is like excrement, which it's not, but like, it's an old one's something or other. So it could be something as bizarre as that. It's just whatever. Like, I don't know. It's bizarre.
I'm cool with the things being that loose. My concern would be if it was like they tried to do something where it's like, I don't know, Pennywise fights all the pets from Pet Cemetery. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't mind. That'd be great. But like, you know what I mean? Like, in Castle Rock, I can't finish the first season of Castle Rock. I just keep getting stuck in it. It just, I don't know. Have you watched it?
I haven't, because I figure if I want to watch like a Stephen King movie or story like on film, there's only like 3 you can really like indulge that are worth your time. Like adapt, like I don't want to watch A Poor Man's Misery. Like, don't they adapt?
Right.
Don't they like try to adapt Misery in it?
That's
and I'm
the
like,
second season, apparently. Yeah.
yeah, like Kathy Bates is great. Why do I want to watch someone else try again? I don't know. I do say that though, but like the Hannibal series is kind of interesting, and that's because Mads Mikkelsen's take is very different to Anthony Hopkins. But I digress. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just glad A Quiet Place is its own thing, and it's not trying to right now is not trying to connect to anything else. And maybe that's just what Krasinski meant by keeping it small. He's like, the producers are like, we got to connect this so we can do something.
We got to connect it to
And then
Bird
he's
Box.
like, no. Yeah, like I would hate that. That would be the worst.
You can't look at it or make noise. Like, oh man, like that would be scary. So I guess we're kind of excited for A Quiet Place too. Who knows? I'm interested in seeing where they take this. Like I said, I'm rooting for it. And well, let's get into the episode proper, I suppose. So our first trailers movie thing we're going to talk about is something that we wanted to talk about last episode, but the trailer dropped the day after we recorded.
It dropped the hour after we recorded.
We pressed stop, and then I looked at my phone, and there was Tenet. And usually I read the plot synopsis for these. However, I will say that PSA, don't go on Wikipedia, look up the plot for Tenet, because in the one sentence description on Wikipedia, it actually spoils 2 very large things from the plot, so don't read it. WB's brief description is an action epic involving from the world of international espionage. Anything else you learn about it is, I would consider a spoiler, but that's just kind of how Christopher Nolan be. Christopher Nolan's movies remind me a lot of Nine Inch Nails songs in that they're elaborate, they're intricately detailed and layered. They're meticulously put together, particularly by one creative voice. However, there's something very cold and sterile about them. Nolan's Batman lives in Gotham, but Gotham looks a lot like Detroit. It feels a lot like Detroit. He made a movie where people enter into dreams, and his using all the imaginative powers of Christopher Nolan's brain. Dreams consist of buildings and hallways and men in suits. All the men in his movies wear suits and look very serious at all times. And that Tenet appears to be kind of in that same vein as far as something like, an Inception or Memento, which if you're a Nolan stan, I'm sure that'll make you very, very happy. The trailer's filled with lots of shots of people looking very confused or disoriented. There's cryptic bits of dialogue hinting that there might be more than meets the eye in regards to the movie's plot. And there is a very brief sequence at the end. It's the closest thing to an action sequence we get, where Nolan's penchant for nonlinear storytelling might be put more at the forefront than we might expect, where a car gets crashed and then the car kind of rewinds itself. What we can tell for sure is that John David Washington is playing a government agent of some sort of level of secrecy. He's recruited into a super secret program where he's given a super secret case where the only clue that what's going on is the word Tenet. It looks good. I mean, all of Nolan's movies look good. It is, almost obligatory to say that it looks good. All of his films they range from very, very competently, wonderfully made to wonderfully competently made, and then containing something extra bit of creativity or some extra bit of wit and soul to them. Memento, I don't care how much of a high schoolist makes me sound, Memento remains one of my favorite films of all time. And so I am eagerly excited for what Christopher Nolan dishes up next. Even Interstellar, which I wasn't a huge fan of, I think is well worth a watch. But those are just my thoughts. Melvin, what did you think of the trailer? Are you a Christopher Nolan fan?
I think the trailer is really good. It has me interested. It has actors I like, so I'm excited for it. I think it's good that Nolan, because he's sort of a secretive guy, is able to have these trailers and basically like tell them not to show anything except for like these 6 scenes, because he knows that's all anybody cares about. And so it's kind of interesting to think a director has some creative control over a trailer. I'm just, of course, speculating. I think Christopher Nolan's pretty good. Everybody, I think, who likes movies and starts to really like movies has that stage where they sort of like backhand Christopher Nolan because everybody else likes Christopher Nolan.
Hipster thing.
Yeah, there's like that Twitter post that was like my first day at film school, and this is what everybody said their favorite directors were, and like 4 of them say Quentin Tarantino, 8 of them say Nolan, and 1 of them says Ingmar Bergman.
Sounds about right.
So like, if you become a cinephile, to just be like cynical about like really harping in on Dark Knight Rises and just being like, that is a bad movie and therefore Christopher Nolan is a bad director, which is just like, it isn't a very good movie, but he's not a bad director. Nolan's fascinating because like you allude to this in your like kind of talk about him, that he's just sort of a sterile guy. I commented to you that like we could definitely talk about this trailer because it likely doesn't have anything inappropriate in the full film, because he's a very chaste man.
Yeah.
Like you can just tell by his movies that like he finds things interesting, but it's not because they're beautiful. It's because they're complex.
Yeah.
And he would probably spend more time contemplating like the complex nature of a flower than recognizing that just its colors are beautiful. So yeah, I mean, he's a fine director. I like his style because it is very alien.
When it comes to romance in Nolan's films, they seem to be 2 running things. Either women are like seductive in a bad way, where if you fall for the womanly wiles, then you'll get like, if you're Batman, you get stabbed. If you're the guy in Memento, like just everything is destroyed. Or women are just almost a distraction. Like there's very little romance. Like I was talking to somebody where almost all the romances in Nolan's films either involve the woman dying or just being dead like at some point. Like
so bad to think about, because like
it's very strange.
I got like 6 Nolan scenes where like it's literally just like woman dies tragically so man can have purpose.
Yes.
So like, bad.
The entire premise of Memento, like The Prestige, is like the one movie that, and even then it's because he's adapting a book, so he couldn't change. He could only change it so much. Talia al Ghul stabs Batman. Like Inception, the woman is just already dead. So like
yeah, that's right.
And I think where Interstellar kind of falls apart is it's Nolan's attempt at like making a movie about love, and he clearly just doesn't know how. Like it felt like someone forced his hand. Where like, you got to make a movie with some sort of like emotion and feeling, and he just didn't know how to do it because he just doesn't know what that is. I read somewhere, I don't know if this is true, that like initially Interstellar is being put together as like a Steven Spielberg project, and it ended up in Tarantino's hands, and that makes a lot of sense if you watch the movie.
You mean Nolan's hands?
Yeah, ended up in Nolan's Tarantino. God,
because if it was Tarantino's the Star Trek movie, that probably will never happen.
Yeah, I think he just exited the project recently, actually. So I shed a tear for that movie because I was very interested.
That would have been one of the most bizarre things to ever exist, and that's what got me interested.
Yeah, it's kind of like he also wanted to make a Luke Cage movie at one point, and man, oh man, I can't even begin to imagine what that'll look like.
I love that. I don't want to just like, I always derail, but I just like, I love picturing the fact that Tarantino's always like, I don't know, I think this will be my last movie. But then like you look at the news and he's got like 6 projects that he's always working on. So
yeah, apparently he's going to make a mini series or something.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I just always am curious as to what Nolan's going to do next. And I think it's because I'm waiting for him to make something that's truly. I'm not saying his movies aren't great. Like he's made, and I think it's dumb to pretend like Nolan doesn't have this incredible streak of films. Like Dunkirk's a great movie. Like The Dark Knight's a great movie. I think Inception, The Prestige, Memento, Insomnia. I think they're all good. But I'm just wanting to see what he does next, and I'm waiting for him to break out and do something really crazy. And I seeing what the spoiler for this movie did make me a little more curious. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the next trailer will just bluntly mention it, but for now I'll keep it under my hat. But yeah.
I agree though. I'm sort of waiting for his Mars attacks. Like where is going to be his movie where he just goes off and he's like, this is actually what I think about. And he just makes a movie like that. So then everybody, like half of the people go, I just can't keep up with this and don't like it. And then the other half of the people go, this is amazing. So I don't know. I'm just waiting to see, like, unless he's been making his Mars attacks for like the past 10 years and like every movie is just exactly his personality, then I guess we'll just never see.
Yeah.
We'll just never see what I want to see then.
Maybe he'll make a musical or something.
Oh, that would make me so happy to think Nolan would be like, I'll make a musical next. Like,
I'm very curious as to what he thinks good music sounds like.
9 Inch Nails.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I'll have an Atticus Ross, Trent Reznor soundtrack.
That'd be wonderful.
People kind of dance by just swaying back and forth slightly.
Or they're like strapped to chairs. It's just like a nightmare.
It says a lot about him where when he got to do Batman, it seems like his thing was like, okay, but like what if all of Batman's characters didn't have any abilities or any of the things that make them Batman villains? Or like he's like, all right, Bane, but like he's just really big, you know? Like and Ra's al Ghul, no Lazarus Pit, he just leads ninjas, you know? Like I don't know, there's just something interesting where you're given like the full essentially DC Comics playbook. Like you can use any characters you want, you can do anything you want, and he's just like doesn't utilize any of it. Or he's just like, that's all distracting from the meat of it, which is men, you know, doing soliloquies, looking at Gotham skyline. That's what Batman's about.
It's distracting from the man meat.
Yeah,
you said the meat of it and then said the man. So
yeah.
it's like, I'll put that together.
that rich meat,
suit and tie man meat.
Yeah.
But I mean, you do have Bane has the there's the scene of like his veins are coursing for like 1 second with like a blue shine in Dark Knight Rises, but it isn't ever anything supernatural or like overtly. Like he doesn't turn into the Bane from the comics, which is like a Gears of War character where their muscles are the size of their head or bigger. He just is like Tom Hardy, and I can't understand him.
He's Tom Hardy after, you know, he got a like Chuck Norris Total Gym, and for 90 days he was like, I'm gonna fight Batman.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh man.
I mean, I think it's easy to say that we're both excited for it. I don't. It's weird. It's weird. There's not much else to say. Like, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. We do a movie podcast, and we're men under the age of 35. Of course, we're gonna go see it. Of course, we're excited. And the trailer is so loose and light on details that there really isn't. I will say that Robert Pattinson, man, that guy's on quite a roll, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm so excited to see him in this. He's just great, and I mean, he did what he could in the Twilight movies. And I think anyone who like watches them now will see that and go, yeah, you know, he's really trying, because that's all he's got. And the director probably just isn't helping him that much. So he's like, okay, I just try to do what I can. He was also like, what, 23 or 22 during that. So he was a lot younger, and he's grown into like a fine wine. He is just distilled properly. And now we get to enjoy him on this like Robert Pattinson or something. It's amazing.
My wife swears by this. My wife says that I need to watch Twilight with the commentary on, with Robert Pattinson's commentary, because she's like, it's a totally different experience. Like, Rob clearly does not like the movie, nor does he like anything in the movie. And it comes across very thickly when he does the commentary. So
I'd be interested in that as long as he's not mean. Because there are some interviews he's done that like he teeters between.
he is so strange.
Yeah, he like teeters between like passive disinterest and like kind of just being mean. And like, yeah, he's a lot younger. So it's like, I get he's still, developing, he's still, learning maturity, but also no excuse when you're in the spotlight either way. It's just, yeah, that could be a very interesting commentary experience.
Did you hear the whole thing with Pattinson? It was like making up random stories about his backstory, where like he invented stories about like tragically seeing someone die at the circus, and then later he's like, "Oh yeah, I made that up." It's like,
Yeah,
I get it,
right.
man. I totally vibe with that kind of energy. If like this is my 50th interview today, I'm just gonna start talking and whatever words come out of my mouth, that's just what's gonna be there.
Well, because like people ask you questions and you start to feel weird rehearsing and saying the same thing over and over. So you're like, I don't know, should I spice this up? Maybe I should put a pause somewhere in there or just introduce a new character. I don't know. I could not imagine a day where literally I just sit in front of an interviewee or in front of an interviewer for like 10 minutes at a time for 8 hours. I don't even like talking that much. So
yeah, I barely get through this podcast. So one of my favorite things is, before we move on, is Bruce Willis very famously started becoming a very curmudgeon old man before all of our eyes. And there's a period where he was still appearing in like bigger movies like Red 2 and stuff. And he was too impressed for those movies. And you could just see the life draining from his body as people would ask him questions. And sometimes he just wouldn't answer them. And then like during one interview, they're like, "So did you enjoy like something or other?" He's like, "The fun part's making the movie. This part, I don't like this part." And he just starts talking about how he hates being interviewed.
You can like, I can picture Bruce Willis sitting there with his bald head and like the person's asking him the question, and then like the camera zooms in on him and it gets quiet, and then you just hear him go, "Terrence Malick, man, he's got the right idea about this whole interview thing." I gotta follow his example. I won't do an interview for 40 years.
That's why Bruce Willis. That is my headcanon for why Bruce Willis started doing direct-to-video movies. No one just pressed for those. No one is pressed for Once Upon a Time in Venice or whatever.
Oh man.
So yeah, Tenet stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Dimple Kapadia, Michael Caine. Who, man, like as long as like Christopher Nolan's making movies, Michael Caine is never gonna die. I love it so much. And Kenneth Branagh. It is written, directed, and produced by the one and only Christopher Nolan, and co-produced by Emma Thomas, who has actually worked with Nolan in a producer capacity on literally every film he's done other than a documentary called Quay. Tenet is scheduled to be released on July 17th, 2020. Moving on from that dumb Christopher Nolan movie onto a movie I know you cannot wait to talk about, Melvin. Morbius. And this synopsis is directly from Sony Pictures' official website, which I just had to include because it's so wonderful. One of Marvel's most compelling and conflicted characters comes to the big screen as Oscar winner Jared Leto, that's going to be printed on his headstone, transforms into the enigmatic anti-hero Michael Morbius. Dangerously ill with a rare blood disorder and determined to save others suffering his same fate, Dr. Morbius attempts a desperate gamble. What at first appears to be a radical success soon reveals itself to be a remedy potentially worse than the disease. Man, oh man. We could do a podcast just about that press release, but we must move on. We could do a whole podcast also just about the history of Sony Spider-Man films, particularly the recent frenemies dynamic Sony has had with Disney. Suffice to say, Sony's been angling to launch their own, and everyone's singing along now, shared universe of interconnected films since they rebooted Spider-Man in 2012 with The Amazing Spider-Man, which a film widely regarded as definitely a Spider-Man movie. I mean, do you want to go into some of the history of the whole thing with Sony and all that stuff, Melvin? I mean, I could condense this down, but do you want me to go into it?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't. It's all fascinating stuff, and anybody listening has to hear about this. I mean, this stuff is gold.
Well, okay. I'm going to make this as brief as possible. I mean, so we're not lawyers. We do not understand, copyright law and stuff like that. First off, if you can do it, dear listener, look up the Sony WikiLeaks hacks and read the emails they sent back and forth about the Spider-Man films and their ideas of what to do. They are it's incredible how much these people don't really understand these characters, and people are pitching things like, like, hey, Snapchat's pretty big with kids. Spider-Man's to Snapchat, things like that. But as best we can tell from the Sony WikiLeaks, Sony currently has a film rights to roughly 900 characters. 900 characters. I mean, that are in some way related to the Spider-Man franchise. And while a large portion of those characters are extremely minor characters, it does include the entirety of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, which means that iconic Marvel villains such as Venom, Norman Osborn, Kraven the Hunter, Big Wheel, they're all with Sony. More interesting for Sony, this means they also ended up with supporting heroes who, in theory, could lead their own film franchise. So if you watch movie news like I do and like Melvin does, if you're wondering why there's suddenly like rumors of a Silver Sable, Black Cat, Night Watch, Jackpot getting their own movies, that's why. However, it's been pretty clear that Sony's main focus, for whatever reason, has been to form some version of the Sinister Six. Famously, Drew Goddard, who was attached to the Daredevil Netflix show, left to spearhead this Sony shared universe. It was slated to direct a Sinister Six film, which is very sad for several reasons. However, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is a movie that's not fondly remembered for a lot of good reasons, or thought of much at all, the main thing that a lot of people remember it by is there was just a weird amount of like characters that were just brought up or referenced for seemingly no reason. BJ Novak played Alistair Smith, which I'm sure you didn't even remember from that movie. There's a scene where Felicia Hardy is randomly shows up, played by what's her name from? She played Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently, and she was in Rogue One.
Oh man, I know exactly who you're talking about, but the name escapes me.
But that's like a big actress. She's in that movie for like a minute because she was supposed to play Black Cat in another movie.
Oh, okay.
There's a scene where a guy walks down a hallway and Doc Ock and the Vulture's gear are just on the wall.
Can we just pause for a second and just put it into perspective? Like, you had the Dark Universe photo where like it's all the actors standing there, but Sony just was like, we're just going to have an entire movie. We don't need to do a photo op.
This movie is that photo op.
Now I want to go back and like watch it again, but I want to watch it with like all of the like there has to be like a Sony WikiLeaks commentary track.
Yeah, and it's like the movie facts caption bubbles like popping up.
Yeah.
The movie.
Yeah. That would be a fascinating piece of film history. It's just like, let's look at all of the failures within this hour and a half, 2 hour movie.
However, I will say that it gives Paul Giamatti as Rhino, clearly thinking he's in a completely different movie than everyone else. And that is a treasure that you can never take away from us. So obviously that film did not do well. Eventually Sony made the deal with Disney to put Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which fell apart and then got put back together. So seemingly on the surface, everything is fine. Sony and Disney are totally cool. They're making these Spider-Man movies together. But then Venom comes out. And if you watch the trailer, you go see the movie. Before the movie, there's a title card. In most MCU films, they have this big, elaborate title card. There's like a big, epic intro. Disney likes to flex some muscle here and there. But with the Sony films, there's a different title card that says in association with Marvel. And that is before movies like Venom. And now before Morbius the Living Vampire. So here's their odd wrinkle in the relationship. And I'll just mention now, when people saw the trailer, nobody was talking about, man, this Morbius character looks super, super duper interesting. I can't wait to see what he's all about. There are two things that people talk about in the trailer. One, there is a shot of a Spider-Man mural in an alleyway, which for whatever reason is a shot of the Sam Raimi suit. It is from the PS4 game. Why that's there, I have no idea. The other thing is Michael Keaton shows up as unspecified character, wearing the prison gear he's wearing at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming. Everyone thinks he's a Vulture. And so now there's this big debate. Everyone's like, okay, what's going on here? Well, here's the deal. Sony and Disney make movies together. They're the Spider-Man films. Now, Disney owns, at this point, every single Marvel property except the 900 characters that belong to Sony. Sony has those characters. Now, when they make a movie together, Sony then gives those characters to Marvel to use in that movie. So, like, you can have Mysterio show up in the second Spider-Man movie. You can have Vulture show up in the first Spider-Man movie. And Disney then puts their characters in the movie. So that's why you can have Happy Hogan. That's why you can have Tony Stark. However, when Sony makes their movies, they can use the Spider-Man characters that were featured in those co-produced movies. So if they wanted to, the next movie, Mysterio could just walk out and just be in the movie, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. The ruffle is just how much of the Disney stuff from those movies can be integrated. So if Vulture was to show up, can he mention that he hates Tony Stark? That's his entire backstory. Like, his entire backstory is built around the fact that after the Avengers movie, his like company lost a bunch of money because they couldn't clean up rubble. That's a pretty big part of that character that it's unclear if they can reference. Can Mysterio talk about working for Stark Industries? Can he talk about, working with Nick Fury? That's very unclear. So Sony keeps making claims that their movies are at least next to, in some way, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tyrese Gibson, who's in this movie, has gone and done interviews claiming that his movies are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Sony has repeatedly made comments that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is going to be in their movies and is going to face down like these villains. Disney holds a position, no, they are not. And so this is the ongoing sort of petty, complicated bickering between the two sides. Which, I mean, that goes to show how interested we are in this actual movie, because this is the most of the stuff that we're talking about it. I mean, the movie looks okay, I guess. I love that Sony's superhero movies feel like somebody went into Sony's basement and found movies made in 2007 and just has dusted them off and is just releasing them. Guy gets possessed by a dark force. He's in pursuit of some sort of idealistic goal. Initially, he's afraid of the power he has, but eventually he harnesses to fight bad guys. Rinse and repeat. Matt Smith, who's playing a guy named Loxias Crown, becomes a character called Hunger in the comics, who is basically just evil Morbius. So there you go. I mean, I love the idea. Maybe it's an age group thing, but I grew up, watching Blade and Underworld and all those movies. So I love vampires. I love monsters. I love the idea of a vampire prowling the streets of New York fighting bad guys. Comic book or not, that's a wonderful premise for a movie. I love monsters and spooky stuff. If Marvel actually gets the Midnight Suns together, I'm all about it. I want to see Blade and Punisher fighting werewolves, or Morbius and Ghost Rider taking on the Hood or something like that. So, like, on its surface, the movie looks okay. Something I as a nerdy guy, I'm into. But clearly the more interesting stuff is the behind the scenes stuff between Disney and Sony and the ongoing fights that they've had. Sony's been trying to put together a Sinister Six movie for so very long. And gosh darn it, by the skin of their teeth, they're going to claw and scratch their way into this movie with or without Disney's help. So tell me, Melvin, what's your least favorite thing about Jared Leto? Is it his seemingly disproportionate level of ego in relation to his talent? Is the various allegations against him? What do you think of Morbius?
Yeah, I mean, Jared Leto has that weird cult thing that was going on, like, what was it, like a couple months ago? So he's kind of he is a wild card. I don't know. I can't say that I particularly like him. I know that he's got a prolific career across mediums, whatever, but I don't know. He struck out already once with a comic book movie. Who's to say he won't strike out again?
He's not a bad actor. I know I make fun of him a lot, but it's just more the idea that he presents himself as like this auteur, like artist,
So I don't know. Morbius doesn't look very interesting. I thought the trailer was very boring and drab, and everything that was shown was not interesting at all. The only things that I heard about it, like before I saw the trailer, was like, okay, Michael Keaton shows up for like a second, and then there was that Sam Raimi suit that was used in the Spider-Man game on the wall with the tag murderer over it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's like, I guess that's just something like in post-production when they decided to do a reshoot, they're like, we gotta do this and toss it in real quick. And like nobody who knows Spider-Man and nobody who knows video games and nobody who knows what's going on, it's just like, put it on the wall really fast. I don't know. It's really strange.
I've heard people defend that because they're like, oh, it's street art. So like people, like if Spider-Man exists in this universe, people would just be making street art. Like people are like, oh, why didn't that could have been a Miles Morales tag? But I'm like, if you're a street artist making a mural of Spider-Man, it's not going to look like that.
Yeah.
Like picture somebody who exists in this world with these like magnificent like characters that really exist in the world. If you were to sit down and be like, I want to make a tribute to Spider-Man, the guy who saved New York, you're not going to draw Sam Raimi's Spider-Man suit. Like, you know what I mean? You're going to draw like a mural. I don't know.
I don't know. Nothing about this looks good. The only thing that's interesting that comes out of this is the background information and all the Sony stuff. So like, for instance, the big questions of like, how far can Sony go with something that was in a Marvel film? Well, like one of the big things about all these was that like, maybe it was on the old contract and not the new one, but like the old contract, like if something was used in the MCU movies, so like Far From Home and Homecoming, that thing could not be used anywhere else. So like that's why Spider-Man, like that's why this Peter Parker is so different. That's why this Aunt May is like super young. That's why like his suit is not the same as any of the other ones. That's why his suit is also like made by Tony Stark. It's not a suit he made. All of these things are because if Sony gets the rights back to like, if it just reverts back and they get to go do their own thing, they can go back to doing typical Peter Parker that makes his own suit and it's like old lady Aunt May and all that jazz. Because legally, nothing's stopping them.
And just so like people are aware, Tom Holland's contract is with Sony. So once he's done with his like obligations with the Disney stuff, Tom Holland is contracted to make Spider-Man films with Sony. So
he was contractually obligated to do 5 Disney appearances, but 6 Sony movies. 6 Sony appearances. So Avengers Endgame technically counts as one of those appearances for both Disney and Sony. But after Far From Home, if there was no deal that was made for him to come, like, to stay in the MCU, he had to still do one more movie, at least with Sony, which puts into perspective a lot more of like, from his like point of view, probably a lot more of the misery. Like, yeah, he would probably go back and work with David Webb again on another movie, but it would have like no connection at all to the MCU, which after Far From Home would be really difficult.
I can imagine Sony would then just start throwing as much money at him as they could to get him to sign up for more movies. Yeah, it's there's so much about this that's fascinating to me. Like the idea that Spider-Man could show up in a movie played by an actor and they're going to do everything they can to position him as like, this is the same character. But then like you can like complete his character arcs from like the million other movies he's been in, So like a big thing in these movies is Iron Man is like his Uncle Ben. Like he's the guy who's like really pushed him to be his hero. He's been his mentor. And the idea of like making the movie where you can't talk about Iron Man being his mentor, like that's wild to me. But it's the thing is, it's inevitably going to happen. Kevin Feige's made comments about it, like how Spider-Man is the only character superpowered across cinematic universes, and they're very clearly trying to set it up a thing where Spider-Man's going to fight Sinister Six, or he's going to fight Venom, and all that stuff. So it's going to happen eventually. I'm just curious as to what it's going to look like. Because, I mean, Sony could pull this off, and part of me respects the hustle, where imagine Sony did put together a Sinister Six movie with Tom Holland Spider-Man that also Michael Keaton's Vulture and Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio, and then, like, whoever the villain for this third Spider-Man movie is. Or, yeah, maybe they finally make that Kraven the Hunter solo film they wanted to make, and then he's also fighting Morbius and Venom and stuff. Like, I mean, I'd be impressed, and I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't be somewhat interested to go to theaters to check it out, just to see what it would look like. I mean, I went and saw Venom just to see what it was like, so that shows how much of a sucker I am.
Venom was quite the movie.
And like I said, it's like these movies feel like 2006 superhero films,
like an early 2000s superhero. It looked straight like,
yeah,
it looked straight like something like Spider-Man 2, where it like balances horror and superhero at the same time.
It looked like I was watching a trailer for the fourth Blade movie. Like that's what it really felt like to me. And I mean, not just because of the vampire thing, but just like the colors and the vibe. And then he's just doing like the Nightcrawler, like jumping around thing. Like it looks like the same special effect. The part of what makes the MCU movies like different is that they're like starting not from scratch, just starting with all this other build up. So they have all the shorthand they can use. So they don't have to have the whole scene of like a guy finding his powers or somebody like having to reveal to their friends and family that they're a superhero. That's all out of the way already. So they don't have to include all that. But I don't know. It's hard to get excited for this movie looking at it. But like I said, I'm a sucker. I'll probably see it. Am I kidding? I don't know.
Oh, well.
And who knows? Maybe it is in the MCU. Maybe this is new. Maybe we're all it's a joke we're not all in on. And then Morbius is going to show up in Avengers 6, or he's going to be in that Blade movie or whatever, So Morbius stars Jared Leto, Matt Smith, Adria Arjona, Jared Harris, Al Madrigal, and Tyrese Gibson. It's directed by Daniel Espinosa, who directed Life and Safe House. The screenplay credited to 2 different duos. First is Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, who wrote Dracula Untold, The Last Witch Hunter, and Gods of Egypt. Wow, what a resume. And Art Markham and Matt Holloway, who actually wrote the first draft of Iron Man. They wrote Punisher Warzone, which I love, don't at me. Transformers Last Night, Men in Black International. That is scheduled to be released on July 31st, 2020. So shifting gears to something completely different, our main event, New Mutants.
Yes. Finally.
It's
come. It's here.
Keep saying that, I'll get delayed again.
I know. Oh, man.
So,
third time's the charm.
We'll see. 5 young mutants just discovering their abilities while held in a secret facility against their will fight to escape their past sins and save themselves. I never thought I would say this, but seeing this trailer made me a little nostalgic. I remember the first time I saw it, I was sitting in theaters. I can't remember what I was seeing because it's been over 2 years since the first trailer for New Mutants dropped, with the initial release date of April 13th, 2018. By now, most of you probably know the story. Inspired by the success of It, Fox released a trailer that teased a more horror-leaning tone for the movie, which was enthusiastically received by everyone, including myself. The one problem, New Mutants wasn't actually a horror film. Things like this make me, I know Disney buying everything up is bad, but sometimes I'm glad that Disney's in control of something and not someone else. This is one of them. So extensive reshoots were scheduled in order to make a movie that actually matched what they were promising people. And to be fair, some people have reported that Josh Boone, in his initial pitched something similar to Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. So in theory, not a bad decision. Everyone could be happy with this. But then the reshoots just didn't happen. And there's never really been a clear reason as to why they didn't happen. Some people have speculated that it was because it couldn't really actually settle on a set tone. Some say that it's because the actual reshoots they demanded were actually very extensive, almost up to half the film. Plus the cast. I mean, to be fair, the cast was a pretty in-demand cast. They got some people who are real hot. You had Maisie Williams in Game of Thrones. You had Anya Taylor-Joy, who's just in a ton of stuff now. You had that guy from Stranger Things. I think his name's Charlie or something. It's in my notes somewhere. But some people speculated that they just couldn't get everyone on set for any time. And then, of course, there was a looming acquisition from Disney, which most theorized that's the reason why they never went forward, is just no one could be bothered. Regardless, Disney acquired Fox. And at that point, most people, including myself, just kind of assumed the movie would either never see the light of day, or what I leaned more towards was it would just get dumped on Hulu or just dumped on Disney Plus as an added incentive to sign up. But lo and behold, here we are. The trailer itself it seems to indicate the tone is somewhere between the horror that we were promised and something closer to a more traditional superhero film. You know, there's still lots of shots of frightened teenagers and kids hooked up to scary electrical equipment. But now we actually get to see people's mutant powers in action. And of course, the trailer ends with a big action shot, as they all do. But the question still remains, what movie are we actually seeing here? Disney has reportedly finished up the movie, but that can mean anything from they did the reshoots, they did their own reshoots, or someone just actually finished the special effects. To be fair, Josh Boone has made vague comments about the movie being closer to what he initially envisioned. But even then, what does that mean? Is he talking about his original pitch tone? Is he talking about the original cut that he produced? So are we getting something closer to Dream Warriors? Are we just getting a garbled mutant Fox X-Men mess? There are a lot of rumors and speculation online, none of which I can actually really confirm anywhere. Some people have said that what Disney's done is remove all references to the Fox X-Men films. So if it's successful, they can sort of retroactively kind of work it in. Others have said they actually made the horror movie. I mean, Josh Boone himself actually put this trailer together and sent it to them. So that to me is a little promising for what we could be getting. But who knows? Who knows if they just slapped this together to, get some back on their investment? Who knows if this is a, stealth pilot for mutants in the MCU? That will all be to be seen. But Melvin, what do you think? Is this going to be worth the wait? Are you excited for Stranger Things with mutants? What are you feeling?
I think the thing with New Mutants is that it's past hype. It's beyond the hype to the point of when it comes out, if it's bad, I won't be disappointed. I'll just be relieved.
Glad it's over.
I'll be it's out finally. It'll be just the climax of 4 years of waiting for this movie to just come out. And it's not even something that I don't think anyone was particularly excited for it. I don't know any of these characters. It's just the premise and the idea and the fact that they just have changed what the tone is supposed to be 6 times is just I don't know, man. That just fascinates me. That's the sort of thing an independent director will do before they even get their script finished, that they'll just go back and be maybe this is better as a period piece. And so then they just change all the setting to I don't know, old age Britain or something, or colonial America. And then they're like, that doesn't really work. Let me toss a werewolf in there. And so I don't know, just the idea of like, this was a big budget movie. The fact that it was coming like at the end of like Fox's just existence. Cause now, of course, you know, I'm sure you've seen, and probably the people listening, like the Fox name is being cut from 20th Century as well as Searchlight. The idea that like the X-Men franchise like was not doing well because like Apocalypse wasn't received very well, and then of course we all knew Dark Phoenix was just going to be a disaster because they've done it like 3 times and they just keep trying to think you can adapt it, but
they just can't pull it off.
My wife doesn't even like the Dark Phoenix like comic series. She was really like just like not impressed with it when she read it, and so she was like, I don't know why they keep trying to adapt it. You got to adapt something else, man. Like just do something else. So yeah, everything about this movie, the meta commentary around it, like just it's just fascinating. So I'm absolutely going to see this movie. In fact, it might just be one of those movies where like I would dare say that I'm more excited for than like anything else, just because of like what it is.
I mean, there's all this built up anticipation for it, you know?
Right. And it's like, it's the built up anticipation of like, not hype. Like I'm not going into it thinking like, this is the finale to 21 movies. I gotta see, like, no, this is the finale of like, just like rumors and like leaks and all this stuff that I'm like, oh, I just got to see this. So I don't know. Something really fascinating about this.
The final pockets of air in the corpse of the Fox X-Men franchise just leaking out.
It's so gross. What a disgusting description.
Yeah. Part of why I'm so fascinated to see this thing is, so like I said, like it's been reported like, oh, the reshoots didn't take place, but there were things that were reshot and added in from other reports. Like the big one was, and something that made me laugh, and I don't think anyone else will think it's funny. John Hamm shot a cameo as like the post-credits tease as Mr. Sinister, who is like a giant villain in X-Men comics who has been teased or planned for in X-Men movies forever. He had a post-credits scene in I think it was Apocalypse, where he was supposed to be the villain of Logan, but then wisely James Mangold was like, yeah, we're kind of gonna go in a more realistic tone, which, you know, a guy named Mr. Sinister probably isn't good for your like very serious Logan movie. There's Easter eggs and references to him in the Deadpool movies, and so finally Mr. Sinister is gonna make his debut, and then they even got John Hamm to play him, and then he just cut from the movie, and then they filmed. And apparently there was going to be scenes throughout the movie of like the Essex Corporation, which is a corporation that he runs, being the people behind the facility and stuff. And that's all cut too, apparently. And then they filmed another cameo with Antonio Banderas as like a different villain, apparently. So that had to be filmed at some point. So like, did the reshoots happen or not? And to what extent did they happen? I don't know. There's so much like unknown here. This cast though is crazy. Like Anya Taylor-Joy is one of my favorite actresses working today. She's just great in everything she's in, and she picks really good projects, which makes you wonder, like, maybe this is better than we all expect. You know, Maisie Williams, this is her like post Game of Thrones thing. Charlie Heaton is the guy's name whose name I couldn't remember. You know, he's the guy from Stranger Things. Like this, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and these characters, I know they're not popular, but like one of the villains is a character called Demon Bear, who is exactly what you're picturing. And I'm like,
I love it.
Yes, give me a movie with this character.
That's like Bad Horse from Dr. Horrible's. Bad Horse.
Oh, I mean, I haven't thought of Dr. Horrible in so long, dude.
It's just a horse. It makes me so happy. Demon Bear. It's exactly what you think.
It's like the movie, what's it called?
Pieces.
Yeah,
the tagline is exactly what you think. That's awesome.
This is what is it, second or third movie just in this episode where we're just talking about everything around the movie more than the movie itself. X-Men and Mutants is so weird to me because I know I say that a lot, but like the thing that's so fascinating to me is it's such a huge franchise that everyone knows and everyone at some level likes. But then if you're like, oh, which of those movies do you like? You're like, well, the first 3 don't age well, and the third one was really bad, and then Origins was bad, and then Apocalypse was bad, and the Wolverine wasn't that great, and then Dark Phoenix is bad. And it's just like, that's 90% of the movies at that point. Like, it's this big franchise that everyone goes to see. Everyone generally will say like, yeah, I like the X-Men, but then like most of the movies that have come out of it are no good, like consistently. And this isn't like a new thing. Like starting in 2006, people were like, these movies are terrible, and they keep making them, and people are like,
Except for like, yeah, I mean, it was what, Days of Future Past and
I like First
that other one.
Class. I like First Class a lot.
The two of those I've
Yeah.
heard are very good. But like the problem kept being that like they just started taking like creative producers started taking more creative control because they wanted to keep building it and expanding it. And then when that didn't work after 3, they were like, okay, we gotta try random stuff, and that didn't work. Like the whole, remember Origins was supposed to be like
First
a whole thing.
first of a series. Yeah.
And then like it's just like it's like a bad movie. It's like a funny bad. It's embarrassing to watch. And then yeah, they had like their weird Blade Runner Wolverine movie, and then which was very interesting that they ever made that.
Which one?
I don't know.
The Wolverine or Logan?
I think the Wolverine was the one that's like set in the future, right?
The Wolverine is set in like the early 90s. He goes to Japan.
Oh, okay. I like couldn't remember. I was like, I thought that because I thought I remember reading like
the Blade Runner Wolverine movie. I was like, what?
Basically,
I missed something.
Yeah, like I guess I'm in a different timeline. I don't know.
I mean, but, Logan is set in the future, but it's like
Logan's in the
near future,
and it's supposed to be the future of 3, isn't it?
That's a good question. It's like unclear of because it also includes.
If it's a spoiler, then don't answer. I mean, I don't want to.
It's purposely unclear. Where like there's some references. So James Mangold did the Wolverine and Logan. So like he kind of made a sequel to his Wolverine movie kind of. So like there's references to the Wolverine, and then there's actually like a cut scene that directly references X-Men Origins Wolverine. And then like but then the rest of the stuff it's like it's unclear if it exists in some amalgam of all of the X-Men movies. Or there's a thing did you see Logan?
I didn't.
Wow.
I have not. So my wife loves X-Men, but like we're both just like behind on all the movies. And I told her once that like there'll be a day when we just binge all of them.
That's gonna be a weird trip, dude.
So much popcorn and so much beer, and it's just gonna be like it'll probably be one of the best summer days ever, but or worst. It really depends.
I mean, it depends which ones you watch. So I mean, cards on the table. Logan is one of my favorite comic book films. I really love it to death, and some people really don't like it for very dumb comic book reasons where like people are like, well, it's not at all like the Old Man Logan comic.
Well, isn't the Old Man Logan comic weird anyway? Like
Logan, I don't know what people expected. Old Man Logan, to give a very brief plot synopsis, involves like a future where like all the villains have won and divided up the United States into sections they run, including like Hulk, who's gone mad with like radiation poisoning. It's just like, yeah, they couldn't do that. Of course they couldn't do that. You can't have like blind Hawkeye driving around with Old Man Logan. That's like impossible. They could never do that. But then like some people are like, well, there's like a thing with like the sort of like the main antagonist kind of people aren't a fan. And it really felt like part of why it was there was some decisions that felt like budgetary decisions to me. And I don't know. Logan is one of those movies that like if you completely remove from your mind that this is a movie based on a comic book and see it as like a celebration / like final film send-off thingy like for one of the most iconic like American film characters of the recent years, I think it works a lot better that way. And it's just I'm a fan of Westerns. I'm a fan of like movies where gruff serious men do the gruff serious thing they're supposed to do, as you've established. So like it was right up my alley. But there's a scene in Logan where like they establish that like the X-Men comics exist in this world. And so it's implied that, hey, maybe all those movies you watched, maybe they're just, elaborate stories about the X-Men. And so like they don't really specify which movies are considered canon in this film, which I think is for the better. Because like comic book movie continuity / continuity in general is just a mess.
It is.
Like I just like there's a character in the movie who's played by a different actor in another movie that most people didn't even realize because it's not like a major character, but like I don't want to have to worry about that while watching the movie. I just want to watch the movie, man.
Isn't that good testament though to Kevin Feige keeping track of so much stuff? And like because like there are some differences in his movies that like apart from Next Time Baby,
Do-
where you just have like a totally different actor in the rest of your franchise. But
Do you want to know what the most egregious continuity thing in the MCU is that no one ever talks about?
what?
In the first Iron Man movie, how does Phil Coulson constantly introduce himself in the movie?
Does he just always say, "Hi, I'm Phil Coulson"?
Well, like he walks up and goes, "Hi, I represent the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistic Division." He says that over and over again in Iron Man. And I'm like, man, that's a tough name. You got to work on that. He's like, I know. And then at the end of the movie, he's like, hi, I represent S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, oh, wow, they decided on the name for S.H.I.E.L.D. And then in every movie after that, where they deal with the past and the whole Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show and everything, it's always been called S.H.I.E.L.D. So there's a whole thing in Iron Man where they constantly talk about the name for S.H.I.E.L.D. over and over again. It's a joke that they keep saying Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistics Division, and then they're like, oh, now it's just S.H.I.E.L.D. And then every movie after that, they just totally disregard that running gag for that movie. That just always bothers me. I don't know why.
I'd love to just have a podcast of like little things that we just go through in the MCU and be like, here's this thing that didn't work. Here's this thing that didn't work. We can call it Next Time Baby, and it's just all this entire podcast dedicated to things that weren't like, no continuity. All right, we're gonna patent pendant that one. Any of you listening, you can't take it. Sorry, guys.
And I'm sure there's gonna be someone who's gonna be like, well, actually, in this tie-in comic from the movies, they established that he was just goofing around, or whatever.
You're saying that's the most egregious. I'm saying the cat scratch is the most egregious. Nick Fury being like, you want to know why I don't trust people? Because of my eye. And then it wasn't a person at all. It was just a stupid cat and a stinger for your movie. Okay.
I'm fine with that. I love the idea that they're like Nick Fury's this guy who presents himself as like this super serious, tough
posturing.
Dude. Yeah, and then deep down, he's just upset that a cat scratched him.
All right, you converted me.
Okay, so
New Mutants.
Yeah,
look, it's just going to be one of the best movies of the year. Let's just be real here. Nobody's going to remember anything else. Oscar winners? No, who cares? New Mutants? This is going to go down in history.
I mean, yeah. Would it be crazy though if it was just awesome? Like it was just great. Like it was really like scary and funny and had great characters. And then it
was a really good like coming of age story of like the fears that we experience and like the last generation not understanding, so they just try to suppress that. And then like it's like, no, Dad, I have to face my trauma. And it's like, yes.
And then he punches Demon Bear in the face. Yeah.
Yes.
It's gonna be like the ending of the Babadook. And the Demon Bear just like evaporates away.
That's right. Be so good.
Yeah, but what if like the post-credit stinger, it's like Antonio Banderas is like, and I'd like to introduce you to my scientist friend Morbius, and you're just like, what? Like they did it, and it's just a lot goes on.
Bravo, Sony and Fox,
Josh Boone,
everybody
you did it. Yeah.
The movie that unites all three kingdoms. It's so dumb.
So New Mutants stars noticeably younger versions of Maisie Williams, Anya Taylor-Joy, Charlie Heaton, Elise Braga, Blue Hunt, and Henry Zaga. It was written and directed by the Fault in Our Stars director Josh Boone. It was written by Nate Lee. The movie is produced by longtime X-Men veteran Simon Kinberg, and this is potentially the final X-Men film to have Lauren Schuler Donner being credited as a producer. She has been a producer on every single X-Men film, and as well as the shows Legion and The Gifted. So this, in that way, it is really an end of an era. Simon Kinberg also made his directorial debut in X-Men Apocalypse. So no, actually, no, he made his directorial debut on Dark Phoenix. He wrote X-Men Apocalypse. My apologies. So of all these movies, what are you most excited for? What are you not going to see? What are your thoughts on this particular batch, Melvin?
I'm definitely going to see New Mutants. That just goes without saying. Tenet seems cool. I don't know. Here's the thing. I have seen so many movies that like now I'm at a point where like I just want to see the things that are strange or weird that shouldn't exist.
Right.
And so like New Mutants, literally like, man, have you ever run a marathon? I mean, New Mutants is like that guy who just didn't prepare, but he is now going to finish the race and he's sweating. His trousers are ruined, but he finished. And that's New Mutants. So to me, I'm like, this that's exciting. Like Tenet, like, okay, Christopher Nolan, like, all right, I'll go see it. I'm excited for Tenet. I don't mean to downplay it, but like, it's just going to be another chased sci-fi movie with people in suits. So it'll be interesting to see how he just basically does the same movie, but in a different way. Morbius. I would love to go and see a movie like Morbius and like have a good time and laugh like at the movie, but I don't like to like disrupt other people who are like, you know, having a good time. So I feel like if I go to see Morbius, it's going to be like it'll be like Dracula. It's going to be all about repressed feelings and fears and urges, but I can't do them because if I do that, it's rude and obnoxious to everybody else. So I guess maybe that's just in theme because it's a vampire movie. So yeah, I think out of all of them, New Mutants, I'm the most excited for.
I mean, I laughed out loud seeing Venom, so I mean, just do it, man. I mean, yeah, New Mutants is this generation's The Man Who Killed Don Quixote or The Thief and the Cobbler, you know, it's just
or Roger Corman's Fantastic Four.
Yeah, Roger Corman's Fantastic Four that exists purely to keep the Fantastic Four rights, much like most Sony Spider-Man movies, apparently. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna. I mean, I'm probably gonna see all these movies. To be honest with you, I mean, they all offer something unique to me that I'm kind of interested in. I mean, Morbius is just. I just feel obligated to see every big comic book movie that comes out because those are the movies that people talk about. Those are the movies that just become part of the cultural zeitgeist in a way that when you either if you're just a movie person or someone who does a movie podcast or likes to just keep up with everything, you just kind of have to see them. So. That's where I'm at with Morbius. As much as I don't like the idea of Morbius existing, just because they had Easter eggs for him in the promotional material for the Amazing Spider-Man 2, not the movie itself. And Morbius at one point was slated to appear as a villain in one of the Blade movies. Like he's just this character that they keep trying to include in things, and nobody really particularly cares for him. So I don't know why they keep doing that, but now we're here. So I don't know. I guess my pick is also New Mutants. Begrudgingly, I want to pick Tenet, which is the correct answer, but
yeah,
if I'm going with my heart, it's New Mutants.
Thanks for plugging into this episode of Trailer Talk. We had a lot of fun making it, and I hope you had a good time listening to it. If you'd like to keep up with Cinematic Doctrine, check out Cinematic Doctrine's website for a lot of reviews, guest appearances, news discussion, and don't be afraid to get connected to our social media, all available in the show notes. And if you want to hear more from Dan, check out his Twitter, @TomRonda1. That's an H after the R. And if you want to support the show, feel free to jump on over to Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can influence the show and vote on a movie I review at the end of each month. Anyways, until next time, stay cool. Want some Cinematic Doctrine swag? You're in luck! We've got 3-inch Cinematic Doctrine logo stickers exclusive for Patreon supporters. Perfect for your travel mug or laptop. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine, link in the show notes, and choose the Independent Theater tier. Doing so will net you other perks too. But let's be real, the podcast stickers are the coolest perk. So get yourself some podcast stickers by supporting on Patreon.